Hi everyone and welcome to Oracle Database AWS Adult channel. In this video we walk you through the steps required to configure DNS Resolution from AWS. When the ODB network is created, two private resolver endpoints are deployed in the corresponding VCN. One endpoint serves as a listening address and the other as a forwarding address. However, DNS resolution is not enabled by default. You can enable DNS resolution from AWS to OCI or from OCI to AWS. In this video, we will see how to configure DNS resolution from AWS to OCI. Here you can see a summary of the steps that we will configure from the AWS console, starting from creating a security group from the Amazon VPC dashboard, then configuring an outbound endpoint from the Route 53 dashboard with an associated resolver rule, and finally testing the DNS resolution for a virtual machine fully qualified name belonging to an Oracle Database AWS ExaDB VM cluster. Okay, perfect. Let's start connecting to the Oracle Database AWS dashboard and selecting one Exadata VM cluster, for example, this one. And from here, we can check the virtual machine fully qualified domain name for both the VMs belonging to this VM cluster. Here I'm connected to 3 EC2 instances within the same VPC ODB peer with my ODB network. And as you can see, I'm not able to resolve the fully qualified DNS name related to the VMs in the VM cluster. To be able to do that, I need to obtain the DNS listener IP and the DNS domain name information from the ODB network where the VM cluster has been configured. So I select the ODB network from the dashboard, and as you can see, in the ODB network are specified the domain name and the DNS listener IP. And then I can double check on OCI side, selecting the VCN corresponding to the ODB network. This one, as you can see, the VCN has the same suffix name of the ODB network. I can double check the DNS resolver associated to this VCN. And as explained before, two endpoints, a listener and a forwarder, has been configured by the automation. And the listener IP address is the same reported in the ODB network dashboard. So now we can move ahead configuring, first of all, a security group that we will associate to the Route 53 outbound endpoint. I have already configured this dedicated security group to be associated to the outbound endpoint. And the important thing is that the outbound traffic is allowed to port 53, the DNS port. In this case, all outbound traffic is enabled by default. Then I can move to Route 53 dashboard, select outbound endpoint, and create my outbound endpoint. It's an easy process. I just need to provide an endpoint name, the VPC in which I want to configure this endpoint. I will use the VPC that is peer through the ODB peering with the ODB network in order to be able to reach the DNS resolver listener endpoint on OCI side, and the security group that I created before, this one. And as an endpoint type, I will use IP version 4 and protocol, the default one, DO53. And the next step is to configure at least 2 IP addresses associated to the outbound endpoint. In this case, I will select a subnet within the VPC that is paired with the ODB network. As a first subnet, I select a subnet in the same availability zone of the ODB network. And as a secondary IP address, I select a subnet in a different availability zone. Well done. And now I can also add an optional tag. In this case, I will add created by. And I proceed with create outbound endpoint. The outbound endpoint creation takes just a few seconds. If I select the outbound endpoint, you see is in creating status and is attaching the 2 IP addresses within the VPC that, as I mentioned before, is the VPC direct peer, ODB peer with the ODB network. Okay, the outbound point is up and running, and the next step is to associate a resolver rule to this endpoint. If I scroll down, you can directly create a rule within the outbound endpoint. I provide a rule name. The rule type, in this case, I want to forward the DNS request. And the domain name that I want to resolve through this outbound endpoint. In this case, it's the domain name associated to the ODB network. And then the VPC for which I want the rule is applied. In this case, I select the same paired VPC, where my EC2 instances are up and running, and the outbound endpoint that I have just created. And super important, I need also to insert the target IP address. In this case, the DNS listener endpoint on the DNS resolver in OCI, on the VCN DNS resolver. Again, I add a tag to identify who created this resource, this rule, and I submit the request. As you can see, the rule has been configured. I can move to route 53 resolver and check the details of these rules. If I select rule, you see this is my rule. There is the domain name for which the DNS request will be forwarded, the VPC for which this rule will be applied, and the target IP address that is the listening endpoint on the VCN resolver. And now I can test the DNS resolution from the EC2 instances within this VPC. Interesting to note that these 3 EC2 instances are spread across 3 availability zones within the same VPC. And as you can see, the DNS resolution works for both the VMs within the VM cluster. We have reached the end of this video. I hope you found it useful, and here's a quick summary of what we covered. The creation of a Route 53 outbound endpoint along with associated security group, the creation of a Route 53 resolver rule, and finally the validation of DNS resolution from an AWS EC2 instance to virtual machine configured on an XDB VM cluster. I'll leave you now with the links to the public documentation and blog posts related to DNS configuration for Oracle Database at AWS. Thank you for watching and see you in the next episode.